Well, let's start with my name. My name is Frank Fernández. I was born in Havana in the middle of the Depression. Actually, it was 1934. And since then, I went to school in Cuba. My parents are, my mother was a teacher, and my father was a small businessman. And remember, I got a good education according to what Cuba was offering education in those days. So I get a very good education in private schools and things like that. Then in the 50s, I came here to study in a prep school and learn English, some commercial things about it, commercial, I don't remember now. And from there, I come back to Cuba, uh, trying to get into the university, but this is 1952, 1953. Batista came with the coup and they closed university. So I started to work with my uncle there, the business he got there. And in 1961, 1960, well, I married my wife and we went to Mexico and we came to New York. And I decided to remain here because I disagree with the system anyway. By 1972 or 1974, and also sure, I started to talk to some anarchists here in Miami, the old Movimiento Libertario Cubano, Cuban Libertarian Movement, who were here for many years in 1960, I think. And by 62 or 64, I joined them in a way, and I started to write things for publication they got called the mm, uh, Boletín de Información Libertaria, some kind of bulletin for libertarian information that they send outside. And I remained there. I militated there for so many years. After in 1979, in 1979 they got a congress in Spain, the fifth congress, the CNT, the Confederación Nacional del Trabajo. Okay, so they invite us, and I went there like a delegate from the Cuban anarchists here, and they were very friendly to me and everything. And we decided from there on to get some kind of magazine publication here. We did Guángara. Guángara was well accepted, and we published Guángara for 13 years in Miami, which was the Miami of the 70s or the 80s, who was a real civil war going on here in those days. The violence with the drugs and everything. So we survived the whole thing, and we in 1993, I think, we decided to close the magazine, but we did a good job. We published our 52 numbers, which is a record for even for any publication in Miami. After that, I decided to write books, and I start with I start with La Sangre de Santa Águeda, which is some kind of biography of Angiolillo and Betances and Cánovas del Castillo regarding the murder of the Spanish Prime Minister in 1897 by Angiolillo, in which the Puerto Rican patriot Betances was involved. I wrote a book about that, trying to explain the magnitude, why Angiolillo decided to eliminate Cánovas and the consequences of what happened there. And that was when I wrote this book was in 1994. That was my first book. And then in 2000, I decided to put together the El Anarchismo in Cuba, which is Anarchism in Cuba, which is translated, like you can see here, to English first and then Italian, French, German. And it is a version in Portuguese too, but it's never going to be published. But I got a translation to the verse in Portuguese. And that's what happened so far. I still writing for anybody, essays and articles in the internet, also the reds and nets and all the kind of things. I am involved in that. And we have we got a group there in the internet. Anarquía en Cuba, I think is the name. And of course, every time I have a chance to give my my honest and my humble help, I'm very happy to do it. Anarchist, sure. How I get the idea. I always have some kind of inclination, or if you want a deviation, about the left. It was very difficult to become a leftist in Cuba when the Communist Party really, completely dominate the scene. So when we came here, and after what happened with the experience we had with Castro and the Communist Party, I started to read about it. I started to read about the history of the anarchists, and the communists, and the socialists, and everybody, all regarding social ideas, because I was interested in that. And this is the 60s already. As the 60s explode, you probably don't remember because you were young. I don't remember very well, but the things I remember was that we have a revolution in this country, and nobody ever heard about it. Nobody knew that this country was having a revolution, and here we are in the middle of social revolution, which changed everything in this country. And I was involved with that thing. I was involved here in Coconut Grove with certain people who were leftists, the same thing. There were the ideas they have were more close to the socialists and communists than really to the. And you had Chomsky in those days, and you have Beckley in those days, and you have a lot of people in those days who were really Marxist. Okay, no matter what anybody told you, they were Marxists. They are Marxists. They say they're anarchists, but they don't. So I start to read and find for myself the difference, and I find out that I was close to the ideas. More close to the anarchist ideas, to the Marxist idea. I don't like order and discipline. I'm a good Cuban. Cubans don't like too much order and discipline. I don't like to tell this and that. So I rather prefer to be an anarchist or a libertarian or whatever you want to call it, than communist, Marxist, whatever you want to call it. As far as I can remember, and I have a problem with my memory, because I am getting old and I don't remember everything. But as far as, especially the 60s, but in the, I remember the Movimiento Libertario was born or was begin in 1960 in New York. And in 1961, they moved down here to Miami because, people saw in those days that the whole thing is going to take, the exile is going to take 6 months. And then 60 years, and then 60 years. Nobody knew. So they moved down here to Miami, and then when I joined, in those days, I remember we're not very many people. We have reunions every Sunday or something like that. Every Sunday, yes, and maybe 10, 12 people. I knew there were more than that. I knew a lot of other people, like another maybe about 20, 25. I'm talking about numbers. I cannot give you straight numbers because some of these compañeros, I knew who they were and how they feel about it, but they were not very. They don't like to join the other ones in some kind of organization for certain reasons. It could be personal reasons or it could be ideological reasons, whatever the reasons were, and they don't get together. But Movimiento Libertario was active in those days against Castro, against the Castro dictatorship. Of course, that's the whole idea was the exile. In the 70s, I remember we participated in a lot of events and a lot of acts, in the street and in theaters or whatever. And we were active until Guángara. Guángara was in the 80s. Now, the movement, or the libertarian movement, in those days, were not too many. They were all big. They were all when they came here. So most of them by the 80s were ready to go. Only a few by that day. So talking about it from the 20s. Numbers really for me don't mean not too much, because this is not numerical, arithmetically, or even how many you got. I never believe in that. I believe that one person can change everything. One person. And 100,000 follow him. That's part of the human nature. So I don't believe that a movement like Barcelona in 1936, when 1 million workers, joined the anarchists. I don't think that's important. The same importance as 10 or 12 anarchists. So it's not again. It's not the quantity. It's the quality. I'm so sorry. I'm quoting Karl Marx, but that's okay. I got no problem with that with Marx. But again, I mean, in the 80s, everybody then concentrated in Guángara, and until most of them disappear. I mean, Guángara actually got close because most of them died. But still, in 2000, we came back to internet, and we start to work things in the internet. That's what we're doing so far.
Okay, so yeah, how did anarchism get to Cuba, and what's the history of Cuban anarchism?
Well, that's a long story. For that questions, I will recommend my book, which goes from 1883 to 2000. And you can read there all the details about what's happening there. We oppose the Spanish colonialists. We oppose the American intervention and American protectoration or protectorate or whatever. We oppose the capital, and we oppose the church, and we oppose everybody, and that's the reason why we lost it. Because you cannot have too many enemies, and we did have a lot of enemies. Everybody was against us, and we were against it. That's the final result of the whole thing. But in the 20s, we organized the working class. We got influence, I would say. Yes, that's the only word I can use now. Influence in the labor movement more than anybody else. I mean, we also in the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th, I would say until 1930 or something like that, we were the more important ideas in the working class. Well, after that, because of the persecution of the different people who hate us, which were so many, we become a minority on the syndicalist and the working class history. So that's what's happening. That's what's the story in so far. But again, my book, everything is in detail. Regarding what happened in the 19th century, for instance, we were the first one who actually create the labor movement in Cuba. I mean, the strong labor movement, because they have a movement before. But we create with the newspaper, El Productor, El Obrero, and several newspapers, we create in those days really an organization. We got a couple of Congress, one in 1887 and one in 1892. A Congress of workers, maybe 40 or 50 unions belong to that. That was a good thing because that's the beginning of the working class in Cuba, and they were organized by the anarchists. Of course, we enter this century. We gotta have the intervention. The American intervention was the first people who become, let's say, friendly. They weren't friendly because the anarchists in the United States were very active in those days, and they commit a lot of good deeds and bad deeds, and the deeds by that and that. And of course, the Americans don't like us very much in Cuba. Same story. So first we have some kind of difference with the American authorities. After that, they came the Cuban Republic, and the Cuban Republic tolerate us. We were not very friendly of the Republican system because we don't like we didn't. In those days, they separate. That's one of the things. Anarchists separate anybody who were not according to their ideas. I mean, what you want to call that, whatever you want to call it. But the fact is that they remain with certain ideas, and they don't want to change those ideas, or they don't want to be pragmatic about those ideas. That happened in Spain, and it happened in the United States. And when you do a thing like that, I mean, you close all the doors, even the left, you are creating a situation in which when you are in a bad shape, they're going to jump on you. Everybody's going to jump on you, and they're not going to help. They're not going to show any solidarity to you because you, after all, you were some kind of lunatic that only want everybody free, and the ideas of the original anarchists at the beginning of the 20th century. In the second decade of the 1920, second decade of the century, we have organized and we got influenced, and our anarcho-syndicalists was a priority for the workers in Cuba. I would say from 1914 to 1924 or 25, for 10, 12 years, we were actually the ideas who influence. I don't like to use the word control because that's the masses, control the masses. That's Marxist. I don't like that. I would like to say better that we have influence in our ideas have influence in the working class. So we create a lot of unions, sindicatos, and we create a confederation. In other words, federation first and confederation later. One confederation in 1925 was great. But in here, the anarchists were more pragmatic, because in that Congress of 1925 in Camagüey, everybody was there. The Marxists and the reformists and the people, public employees, and even the anarchists who, the ideas, if you read the whatever they decide at the end of the Congress, you see that the influence of the ideas are there. However, that was an open Congress for everybody. And some people criticize that, especially the Spanish who came from in exile from Primo de Rivera dictatorship. So they disagree with us on that. They were more less pragmatic. They were more formal, and they don't want to get these people inside, because these people, Cubans, they believe in that, and they open their arms. Good idea. Okay, by the Machado dictatorship, who started in 1925, and then in 1932, we have to be involved in violence against the government, because the Machado dictatorship, killed probably three of our more important responsible workers who got more responsibility in the Confederation. And when he started to kill people and deport people and send people to jail, you have to respond that. That's human nature. I mean, this is nothing. They say, well, the anarchy, they have to do it because that's the way the idea says that you have to hit back. I think this is a human response. I don't think the anarchists did nothing wrong with that, because that's what everybody responds. Unfortunately, I mean, the repression against us was more specific and more stronger than the rest of the opposition, especially the Communist Party, which at the end packed with Machado. And from there, from the 30s, I mean, you see that we are decreasing in people and decreasing in ideas. We were put away by everybody, by the government, by the persecution of Batista in those days, the first time Batista, and by the capitalists, and by the church, and by the military, and you name it. I mean, everybody hate the anarchists. And here comes the Civil War. The Civil War was also a good example of what happened. That's have repercussions in Cuba. When that happened, and when the Republicans lose the war in 1939, a lot of exiles, a lot of Spanish exiles went to Cuba. As a matter of fact, I think we, according to the information I got, we got fast passports, we got help with the embassies in Paris and Lisbon to help compañeros there, and they arrived in Cuba, and we received them with open arms. The big problem in those days is this depression. Nobody had a penny. Everybody was broke. And he come about maybe 1,000 compañeros from Spain, and they were in the same situation, sick, beaten, and finally without work. And they didn't last too much in Cuba. They moved to different places like Mexico, Venezuela, Panama, so on. So in reality, a few remain there. They even separate from ourselves, from the Cuban, I gotta say the natives, well, the Cubans, the Cuban anarchists, and the Spanish anarchists, or whatever you want to call it, whatever word you want to use. For me, everybody was an anarchist. I don't care if you're Italian or you are from San Visi or you're from Ukraine. I mean, you are an anarchist. In any case, that was one thing. Some of the anarchists become involved in politics with the Partido Auténtico, which was another mistake too. You don't join the politicians. Of course, some of these people was in desperation because they were hungry. I mean, the situation in Cuba was really poverty. We say misery, but not poverty. I mean, there was misery all over. So some people, I understand that human beings sometimes gotta, and they become involved with the politician of the day because this was the only way to survive for them. Fine, I never criticize that, but I don't think that according to the ideas. I mean, if you are really a guy who believes in your ideas, you gotta sacrifice yourself, the spirit of sacrifice. I don't think the Cubans have that spirit of sacrifice like the Spanish got, for instance. It's a matter of character. The Spanish character is built to make sacrifices. That's the reason of the saints and the soldiers and the conquistadores and all this crap, because they're really to sacrifice in order to get something. The Cubans are not exactly that way. I mean, even we descend from the Spanish, but we're not that same spirit of sacrifice. So this is a difference there. Nobody knows, I think. Anyway, when Castro came in the revolution, some of the Cubans, anarchists, agree with that. I said, it's a good idea that we have Castro here before the revolution won or Castro won the power. After the 1st of January 1959, the movement is divided. They call the Asociación Libertaria de Cuba. The Asociación Libertaria de Cuba was divided among the people who sympathize, approve whatever the government was doing, and the other one who say, we don't trust this guy. I mean, this guy was a gangster, this guy got different ideas, this guy is not too well set in the head. So there was some kind of split there. People make mistakes there too, and that in politics, when you make a mistake, it's very costly. I mean, in life, you make a mistake and you pay for it, but not when you are in politics. In politics, you make a mistake, you got to pay a lot for that. And that's what happened to us. We made mistakes and we got to pay for it. That's the reason why we have to get into exile, move out of the country. I don't want to say run away because nobody ran away. I would say that we got to get out of the country, and we did. Or at least those compañeros. I was not involved in those days for that. But that's what I know about it. So here we're doing whatever we do necessary. And more or less you have an idea of that. In the end, you can't eliminate me completely. But anyway, let's go back. Let's go back to the question. Why some Latin American compañeros supposed to be anarchists, they disagree with us because our politics is against Castro and Chavez and everybody. That's typical. First, it's a typical thing of the anarchist movement. To any anarchist, we disagree with anybody who is in power. Okay, let's start with the beginning. If we disagree with Chavez, like we disagree with Perón 50 years ago, was because Perón was in power. And of course, we are anti-government. Okay, typical anarchist. The politics of being in the opposition for so many years, maybe it's not very productive. I give you that. But it's part of the essence of the ideas. Being in the opposition and being in the revolt. Against who? Against anybody. Somoza, Batista, Perón, Pérez Jiménez, anybody in Latin America. So what happened? He came Castro. Castro for us was not a savior. For some of us, yes, but not for everybody. He was a savior. He was a different kind of dictatorship. This is the dictatorship of the proletariat. Something that smells bad here. It's a rat here. It's what? Proletarians. So we didn't really approve Castro at the beginning because it was not only the government, but also the power, and also the state. But keep that in mind. Revolution is also part of the state. He owned the state. Now, some Latin Americans, compañeros, didn't realize that. Oh, that's okay with me. I got nothing against that. I mean, if you want to believe that Perón was great, fine. Applaud Perón. I myself not going to do it. But if you feel like Argentinians that Perón was a great man, fine. This actually happened with Chavez. See, some people say Chavez was great. He is great. Or maybe Ortega in Nicaragua. Okay, fine. I got nothing against that. But in my book, an anarchist is supposed to go against the state and against the government and against the dictatorship, which is in Cuba and actually is in Venezuela. So that's the reason why we feel that way. Now, a lot of Venezuelans and a lot of Cubans and a lot of Argentinians disagree with that, or Chileans, for instance. Hey, Chile is an interesting place. Here in Miami, I got proof. In Guángara, we attacked Pinochet for 7 years. We didn't like Pinochet, we attacked Pinochet. Why? Because Pinochet was a dictator. And he owned the state. Okay? Now, with Castro, he's the same thing. I never saw any difference between Pinochet and Castro. Stalin or Hitler. In my book, not everybody thinks that way. Some people say no. You know, there are good counselors and there are bad counselors. There are good nationalists and there are bad nationalists. And that is crap. In my book, I'll answer your question. Sorry about crap. That's a good question because a lot of people define the idea, or the ideal, or whatever, in several ways. You know, besides, it's anarcho-syndicalist, it's anarcho-pacifist, it's anarcho-feminist, if you wanna. You know, it's a lot of anarcho things. Anarchism itself, for me, after I read most of the theories, because anarchism is based in theories. No, it's not a doctrine like Marxist is a doctrine. We are theories of the Proudhon and Kropotkin and Bakunin and all these really clever Russian thinkers, and also French Reclus, great in those days. It's a long list of them. And they do have an idea. We basically, and that's what's important for me, if you read everybody, you notice that basically is humanity, is freedom, is justice, is something that is not new even for that century, but they all have a coincidence in point of views, no matter if it's a Russian or it's a Spaniard or it's an Argentinian or it's a Chinese, they all have one thing in common, and it's all the adjectives I just give you, is the love for freedom. It's also the idea of sacrifice for an idea. It's some kind of religion, if you want, and I think in some way for some of them was a religion. I would say so. Tosso was a religious person in the sense he was a Christian, but he also got some of the anarchist ideas in him. So, I mean, it's also some sense of religion in the anarchist ideas, which is the continuation, the continuity, the millennium, the next day is going to be better, which is also another thing that I find in common, at least for most of them, optimists. In order to be, the first thing you need to be an anarchist is to be an optimist. You cannot be a pessimist. Because if you dream, you're a dreamer, or utopian, or whatever they want to call you, you have an idea of the future, which has to be good, positive, okay, no negative involved. Everything is positive. Tomorrow's going to be better. Okay, yes, you're going to say, cliché. It's Dr. Pangloss. It's a Panglosian idea that we live in the best of the worlds, okay, the famous phrase. No, I don't think we live in the better world, but what we hope, okay, that tomorrow is going to be better. So that's optimism. So it's more like a realistic thing in a human being. So that's what anarchy is for me. I cannot talk for everybody, in my opinion. Well, that's your typical petit bourgeois idea. Everybody, all our enemies say that because the association of of anarchy with chaos. No, I'm sorry. Proudhon have a fight for 20 years. He fought Larousse. Larousse is the one who wrote the famous dictionary and made definitions about what it was. So Proudhon have such a dispute with this Larousse for 20 years, trying to explain him that anarchy don't mean chaos. He failed. So if Proudhon failed, it's going to be very hard for me to succeed in a matter like that. Anybody, my dear comrade, think whatever want to think and whatever opinion they have about dialectics or semantics. Semantic, the meaning of the words. You can apply any bad word, even a dirty word, you put it in a perspective or a sense which happen to be a great word. Okay? Or vice versa. You can insult, in those days, you can insult American. In 1898, you insult an American if you call him a cowboy. Look at a cowboy. That was an insult. A cowboy was nothing. Was a despective. I mean, derogatory term used by the Americans at the end of the 19th century. Now everybody call cowboy to everybody. So you see, it's not only the way you say it, but also the semantics and the meaning and how people use that. So if some people want to believe that anarchy is chaos, fine, good for them. If other one want to say no, let me explain you what anarchy is and teach people what anarchy means. And for me, it's not anarchy, it's anarchists. Keep this in mind. Because anarchy could be confused, but anarchists, not. So when you use the word, you got to be careful not to be confused. Okay? Well, regarding your question about the Cuban government, let me tell you, it's not a Cuban government, it's a Cuban dictatorship who've been there for the last 50 years. Now, you give me the news that, what's the name of the guy in Egypt? Mubarak is deposed today, or he quit, or he resigned. That's a good thing. I'm happy. I will celebrate. But Mubarak was in power for 30 years, and everybody hate him. Castro been there, or the Castro brothers, or the system, been there for the last 50 years, and nobody complains. Even so, like I explained before, some people in Latin America agree with the revolution and Castro and all that stories and all this comedy or tragedy or whatever you want to call it about Cuba. What's happening in Cuba? Cuba is a backward country. In Cuba, the situation is bad. People are protesting about what's going on there because they don't have not only freedom or justice, they have every day they have less and less to eat because the production is down, and not because I say that here now, it's because the government gotta admit that the production of food is down, and they have to import food to feed the people in Cuba. The most interesting thing here is that we have a blockade, which, by the way, I disagree with them. You give me that question, but I'll give it to you. I disagree with the blockade because the blockade is so good. And why the blockade is so good? Because if there really was a blockade, that the one that the war imposed to South Africa and terminate apartheid, yes, that was a serious blockade. This is not a blockade. This is a joke. Okay, so the Cuban government needs food. Where do you think the food came from? Venezuela? Mexico? Spain? Russia? No. It came from the United States. And they pay, I think the last year was about $15 million. $50 million imports of food from the United States. The year before it was 17. I mean, they're importing food from the United States. Something never happened in Cuba. I mean, we may import casinos, and maybe we import burlesque queens from New Orleans in those days. I can't remember. Or maybe we can import in those days Vegas showgirls. Yes. But we never put food. So what's happening here? That the whole system is broke. It's a dictatorship. It's not freedom. It's not communication. They can't communicate with them. There are no internet. There's no telephone. There's nothing. They live in one of the worst dictatorships in the world right now. So that's the reason why I oppose that government, because it's a tyranny. It's against my principles. I am a libertarian, so it's against my principles. Today and tomorrow. Today, in some way, was also yesterday. But the fact remains that you probably have more experience than I do have traveling. I travel a lot. I even went to Russia, met a Russian anarchist. I went to Finland. I went to Stockholm. I've been in a lot of places, Buenos Aires and Seattle, and you name it. I've been there. So what is my idea? What's going on? Yes, the Europeans, anarchists, like in Spain, especially Spain, Italy, and France in that order, maybe in England too, Scotland and Ireland. Yes, they are, I would say, groups, associations, syndicates, unions. There are anarchists, and they preach and they accept anarchist ideas. Of course, we gotta ask ourselves, what are those ideas? And then we gotta come back again on questions we had before. Anarchism is not the same for everybody. Anarchism will be a way for the Ukrainians and be another way for the South Africans. It's not the same thing. But again, the idea itself, in essence, is what I say: freedom, liberty, justice, and so on. So now, if you look at the world today, and you see the situation of the world today, you notice that we're going back. Neoliberalism, globalization. This is nonsense. This is we know already about this type of economical system, since we have the so-called at the end of the 19th century, the Manchester liberalism. Manchester liberalism is a liberalism of the people who create a tremendous amount of money, thinking that they can create riches, they can create another more money, and of course, in great abilities, they will help the workers and the poor. And what happened in those days that the anarchists went up, and everybody became an anarchist because the whole thing was a comedy or a tragedy or whatever. Now, today we are creating we are creating the same conditions through the globalization and the neoliberalism. What is it? Okay, so now it's the privatization. Privatization is we're going to sell, we're going to buy from the state everything, and we're going to run it ourselves. And of course, that's an anarchist idea, they say, because after all, we are weak in the government. Fine and dandy. I don't believe that. But anyway, the fact remains that they are creating the same conditions socially and economically that happened at the last days of the 19th century, when the anarchist was up, and the anarchist was popular, up and everything, because of the conditions. Okay, we are still alive. We survive for the last 100 years because our duty was that survive to pass the message to the next generation. That's what happened to me and what happened to the people before me, the compañeros before me. And probably it's going to happen to the compañeros after me. Anarchy is not in the next corner, like they saw at the end of the century. That was wrong too. That was one of the mistakes they made. They were too much optimistic. All right, I believe in optimists. I am an optimist. And I think eventually the future, in some way, is going to be anarchist. Why? Because we are going to survive to tell everybody that, yes, it's possible. That's a lot of things we can do. I mean, it's not only one thing we can do. I mean, being an anarchist is just not being an anarchist or call yourself an anarchist. It's simple. That's a simple answer. I think it's a little more complicated. I mean, you know, by yourself, by the history of the anarchists, that we've been persecuted sometimes for ideas. And we got martyrs, we have people who die, and so on. So this is a difficult idea to carry on. This is not another idea. This is not a religion that everybody agree with you. So what we do, we have to do more than what we're doing now. It's not only surviving and passing the message to the next generation. That's part of the thing, but that's not the thing. The thing here is how we can be able to make ideas that without denying the ideas of the 19th or the 20th century, create another ideas. In other words, how can we live with this society and with the economical systems and with capitalists and with the church and with the military? How we can, let's say, not say be friendly, because we're never going to be friendly, but at least have certain relationship with them. How can we be able to not to change, but to have another ideas to help us, make it easy for us to keep going. In other words, what I'm talking here is some kind of pragmatism, not only about our enemies, about the left. It's a great opportunity right now. I mean, the left is completely gone. I mean, Marxists are lost in the desert. The Trotskyites have been in the gulag for so many years they can't see anymore. So, I mean, let's face the facts of life. I mean, this is a great opportunity we have to, not to take over or to invade, but just to have an idea, to exchange ideas with everybody, with the left and with the right and with the church and with everybody, and say, well, exactly how can we make this thing go? That's a very difficult task, because there's a lot of people with closed minds among the anarchists, especially the Europeans. Europeans are intolerant regarding ideas. I am not intolerant about ideas. I think we should take from everybody, and everybody should take from us. And then not create a new anarchist or a different anarchist, but something so close to the anarchist that can sit and talk and discuss ideas with everybody. Something which is almost impossible at this point. And as far as I know, it's ridiculous. That's something we can do. Thank you. Thank you, my people.
Well, thank you. Thank
Don't
you very
remember the both of me.